The moment that changed my life forever didn't come quietly. It hit me in a way I never could have prepared for. In a split second, where everything I thought I knew about my family collapsed. I remember sitting there, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears, staring at something that made no sense at first. And yet, deep down, I knew it was real. Up until that second, I thought I was living in a safe and predictable world, surrounded by people I loved and trusted. But then, in front of me, the truth appeared unwelcome, undeniable, and devastating. My stomach turned cold as the weight of it sank in. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't even think. All I could feel was disbelief, as if I had been thrown into a nightmare I didn't recognize as my own life. There was no warning, no gentle unraveling, just a sudden and brutal cut through the fabric of everything I had built my life upon. Betrayal has a sound. It's the silence after your world shatters. That was the silence that wrapped around me, suffocating and endless. I kept asking myself how I could have missed the signs, how I could have been so blind. The people we love the most, the ones we let closest to us, can sometimes carry the sharpest knives. And that was the realization that left me frozen in that moment. Someone I trusted had been hiding a truth so dark, it made me question my own judgment, my own memories, even my own worth. That instant didn't just reveal a secret. It destroyed the story I thought I was living, and sitting there, stunned, I realized my life was no longer the same. The person I had trusted, the person I thought I knew, had been a stranger all along. But to understand how I ended up here staring at that unbearable truth you have, to know where it all began, before the storm, before the betrayal, there was a life that looked ordinary, even comforting. That's where my story truly starts. Looking back now, it's strange how normal everything felt before the truth came crashing in. My days followed a rhythm that, at the time, seemed steady and familiar. I would wake early, make myself coffee in the same old mug I'd been using for years, and sit by the kitchen window watching the neighborhood slowly come alive. There was comfort in those quiet mornings, comfort I didn't realize I was clinging to. Family was always at the center of my world. My son, Mark, worked long hours at the plant. He was a good man, steady and dependable, though sometimes too willing to stretch himself thin for others. His wife, Emily, had been in the picture for just a few years, but to the outside world, she looked like the perfect daughter-in-law, polished, charming, quick to smile. My friends often told me how lucky I was that Mark had found someone like her. And at first, I believed them. We had a little routine. Emily and I, she would stop by now and then to ask if I needed groceries, or suggest that maybe it was time I thought about moving into something smaller and easier to manage. At the time, I brushed it off as concern. It seemed harmless, even thoughtful. But now, when I replay those conversations in my head, I hear the undertone the way her voice always carried a hidden weight. Like she wasn't just offering help, but steering me towards something she wanted. Even the small details stand out differently in hindsight. The way she handled money so naturally, almost insisting on taking over the bills when Mark was too tired. The way she'd linger in my house, asking about old photographs or family heirlooms as if cataloging what mattered most to me. At the time, I felt touched that she cared enough to notice. I told myself she was simply trying to be part of the family. And yet, there were moments that didn't sit right. A glance that lingered too long. A smile that seemed too rehearsed. A story about her past that shifted slightly each time she told it. I ignored those instincts because I wanted so badly to believe in the image she presented not only for myself, but for my son. Life seemed ordinary on the surface, even comforting. But beneath it all, cracks were forming. I just didn't know it yet. That sense of stability I leaned on so heavily was already slipping away. And soon, the red flags I had brushed aside would no longer be ignorable. It was around this time that the air in my home began to feel different. Heavier somehow. Conversations with Emily, once polite and cordial, started carrying a sharp edge I couldn't ignore. I would mention something small, like how the bills seemed higher than usual or how I misplaced an important envelope, and she would brush me off with a sweetness that felt more like condescension than care. Her words sounded kind, but underneath, I always sensed a quiet impatience, like I was an obstacle she needed to maneuver around. At first, I thought it was just me being sensitive. After all, she was younger, full of energy, and I was still adjusting to living without my husband. Maybe she thought she was helping by taking control of things I struggled with. But the more I noticed, the more uneasy I felt. She was slowly weaving herself into every decision: what to sell, what to keep, even how my son should spend his overtime pay. I tried talking to Mark about it once. I told him I felt like Emily was pushing me aside, making choices that didn't feel like hers to make. He laughed softly and told me I was overthinking, that she was just trying to lighten my load. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that I was imagining the shift in tone, the way Emily's hands tightened on the steering wheel whenever I pushed back, or how her eyes seemed to study me like a puzzle she was determined to solve. But then came the moment I couldn't explain away. We were driving home from the store, and I happened to glance into her purse as she reached for her wallet. Tucked between receipts and folded papers, I saw an envelope addressed to a name I didn't recognize: Rebecca. For a split second, I told myself it must have been an old piece of mail, maybe something that got mixed in by mistake. But the envelope was new, freshly stamped, with a date from just a week earlier. I didn't say anything in the moment. My throat tightened, and I simply looked out the window, pretending I hadn't seen it. But my mind wouldn't let it go. Why would Emily have mail under another name? Why had I never heard of this Rebecca before? That was the first undeniable crack in the image she had built. The moment when all my unease shifted into something heavier: suspicion. For the first time, I felt the quiet certainty that something was terribly wrong, and I couldn't keep dismissing it as grief or imagination. I knew then that I had to start paying closer attention. Because if I was right, if that envelope meant what I feared it did, this was only the beginning. After seeing that envelope in Emily's purse, I couldn't shake the unease pressing against my chest. I told myself I might be overreacting, but the doubt had already taken root. Quietly, carefully, I began paying attention in ways I hadn't before. I started small. Whenever she came by the house to help, I noticed how her eyes scanned the rooms, pausing on photographs, jewelry boxes, even my filing cabinet. At first, I thought it was simple curiosity, but the longer I watched, the more I realized it was closer to calculation. She wasn't looking with sentiment, she was taking inventory. One afternoon, when she left a stack of papers on the kitchen counter, I found myself lingering over them. Buried in the pile was a bank statement with transactions that didn't add. Up large withdrawals and transfers I knew my son's paycheck could never cover. Expensive dinners in Chicago, high-end clothing stores, and a hotel charge. My son had been working double shifts at the plant. He barely had time to eat at home, let alone enjoy fine dining downtown. That night, while she was busy chatting with neighbors outside, I walked past their mailbox. The sight of another letter, again addressed to Rebecca, made my stomach twist. This wasn't a mistake. She was living under more than one name. The puzzle pieces were beginning to click into place. But what they revealed made me sick. The envelope, the strange charges, the way she had slowly tightened her grip on our finances, it wasn't just manipulation. It was theft, deception, and something far more dangerous. I remembered how insistent she had been about helping me organize my documents after my husband passed. I thought it was kindness at the time, but now I could see it for what it was: access. She hadn't been helping me, she had been studying me, and the realization struck like ice through my veins. She wasn't just interested in my son's money, she was interested in mine. That was the second twist, the part that made me feel both furious and terrified. Emily wasn't simply a difficult daughter-in-law with expensive tastes. She was after something larger, more permanent: our savings, our home, even the life insurance my husband had left behind for me. I sat there with the papers spread across the table, my hands trembling as I tried to breathe. It was overwhelming, the weight of it all. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't stop. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. Emily wasn't who she claimed to be. And if I didn't uncover the full truth soon, my family could lose everything. And so I told myself, no matter how frightening it became, I had to keep going. Because what I had found so far was only the beginning. When the weight of what I had uncovered became too much to carry alone, I finally turned to my son. I sat across from him in my kitchen, papers spread out on the table, my voice shaking as I explained what I'd seen: bank withdrawals, letters under another name, charges that made no sense. I waited for him to share in my alarm, to see what I saw so clearly. But instead, his face clouded with irritation. He told me I was imagining things, that grief had made me paranoid. He said Emily was handling the finances because he barely had time to breathe, let alone sort through paperwork. He told me I was reading too much into it, and that she was only trying to care for me, for both of us. The sting of his dismissal cut deep. I had raised this boy, loved him through every stage of his life, and now, when I needed him most, he couldn't see me as anything but an obstacle to his happiness. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him look at the evidence. But instead, I felt my voice falter. I could see that nothing I said would matter. His loyalty to her was stronger than his faith in me. That night, the loneliness pressed heavier than ever before. To have the truth burning inside me and no one willing to believe it was a pain sharper than grief itself. The silence of my home felt endless, a reminder that I was on my own in this fight. It was only a few days later when Emily made it perfectly clear she knew exactly what I was doing. She came by under the guise of dropping off groceries, her smile as polished as ever. But the moment we were alone, that mask slipped. She leaned closer, her voice soft but laced with venom. She told me that digging into things that didn't concern me could be dangerous. That accidents happen all the time: falls, mistakes, things people never see coming. Her words landed like ice in my chest. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was a threat. For the first time, I saw her without the pretense, without the charm. And what I saw was someone cold, calculating, and willing to do whatever it took to protect her secret. I stood there in silence, my heart hammering, as she picked up her bag and left as if nothing had happened. From the outside, she looked like a caring daughter-in-law, smiling and helpful. But behind closed doors, she had shown me who she really was. In that moment, I realized the truth I had been trying to avoid. No one was going to save me. Not my son, not the neighbors, not anyone else. If I wanted to protect my family and uncover the full truth, I would have to do it myself. After that threat, something inside me shifted. For weeks, I had felt small, cornered, powerless. But in that moment, I realized I had survived things far harder than this grief, heartbreak, raising a family on my own. If Emily thought I was going to shrink back and let her dismantle everything I loved, she had underestimated me. I decided then and there that I would fight back. Quietly, carefully, I began to prepare. I started writing everything down: dates, amounts, strange behaviors, even the exact words she used when she tried to intimidate me. I gathered every receipt, every statement, every scrap of paper I could find. At night, I sat at my kitchen table, sorting through files like a detective piecing together a puzzle. I also began watching her differently. I noticed her routines the nights she claimed to have meetings, the days she disappeared for hours, the way she avoided answering simple questions about where she had been. The patterns started to emerge, and with them, a clearer picture of the scheme she was running. But I didn't just sit in silence. I reached out to old friends, asked subtle questions, even visited the library to dig into public records. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how elaborate her lies really were. It wasn't only about my son, it was about me, my savings, my home. She wasn't planning to settle into our family. She was planning to strip us, bare and vanish. There were moments when fear crept in, when I wondered what she might do if she realized I was getting closer to the truth. But alongside the fear was something else: determination. I reminded myself that I had spent decades standing in front of classrooms, full of restless children, holding my ground with patience and strength. I wasn't weak. I wasn't helpless. By the time I laid all the pieces out in front of me, I knew I was ready. The confrontation I had been avoiding was now unavoidable. Emily believed she held all the power, but she was about to learn that I was not the easy target she thought I was. And as I prepared for that moment, every nerve in my body was alive with the knowledge that the truth was finally within reach, and that soon the mask she wore would shatter. The night of the confrontation is burned into my memory as if it happened only yesterday. The air in the house felt thick, heavy with the kind of tension you can't quite see, but you can feel pressing against your skin. I knew Emily would show up. It was her routine. She always found a reason to stop by, always wrapped in that practiced sweetness that had fooled so many. But this time, I wasn't going to sit quietly and let her dictate the tone. I was ready. When she stepped through the door, carrying a casserole dish as if she were the perfect daughter-in-law, my heart quickened. On the surface, she was all smiles, making small talk, pretending nothing had shifted. But her eyes gave her away. They darted quickly across the room, scanning for signs that I had uncovered too much. For the first time, I saw her not as family, but as the predator she really was. She sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where I had pieced together her lies late into the night. She leaned forward, her tone syrupy sweet, telling me I'd been imagining things, that my suspicions were hurting the family. She tried to twist my love for my son into guilt, reminding me how fragile happiness can be. It was the same manipulation she had used so many times before, but I was no longer falling for it. Still, her words cut deep. For a moment, I felt the old doubt creeping in. What if I was wrong? What if I really was? Letting grief cloud my judgment. But then I looked at her and remembered the envelopes, the bank statements, the threats whispered when no one else was listening. My fear hardened into resolve. As her voice sharpened, she leaned in closer, warning me that if I didn't stop interfering, there would be consequences. She spoke casually, as if she were commenting on the weather. But her meaning was clear: accidents could happen. People could lose everything in the blink of an eye. That was the moment I chose to act. I slid the folder I had prepared across the table. The one filled with copies of every document I had collected: bank records, letters under false names, even photos of her picking up mail addressed to identities no one else knew. Her smile faltered for the first time. I told her I had already sent duplicates to someone I trusted, that no matter what she tried, the truth was out now. For the first time, she couldn't mask her expression. The polished, charming facade shattered, and what stared back at me was cold fury. She tried to laugh it off, tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. She shifted tactics, desperate now, threatening that if I exposed her, my son would never forgive me, that she would make sure he turned against me for good. But she didn't realize that I had already thought of that. I told her I had recorded our last conversation, the one where she had slipped and revealed more than she intended. And I had shared that recording too. I watched the blood drain from her face as she realized I had been one step ahead this time. The balance of power shifted in that instant. She was no longer the one pulling the strings. I was. The silence stretched between us, and for once, it wasn't my silence that felt suffocating. It was hers. Finally, she stood up abruptly, her mask gone, her eyes filled with rage. But I didn't flinch. I had already won. She stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her, and in that echo, I felt a release I hadn't known in years. I sat at the table, trembling but victorious, my evidence safe, my resolve stronger than ever. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. The truth was finally out in the open, and she could no longer control me. But this story didn't end with her walking out that door. What came next was just as important: the aftermath, the reckoning, and the lessons I carried with me long after. In the weeks that followed, the pieces finally began to fall into place. Emily's polished mask couldn't withstand the weight of the evidence. Authorities got involved, and slowly, the web of lies she had spun began to unravel. For all her confidence, she had left a trail behind her, one that couldn't be explained away. The woman who once held my family in the palm of her hand was now facing the consequences of her choices. For me, the greatest victory wasn't in watching her downfall. It was in reclaiming my peace. I could breathe again in my own home without fear or suspicion. I could look my son in the eye and know that, even though the road back to trust would take time, the truth was finally on our side. This ordeal taught me more than I ever expected. It showed me the importance of listening to my instincts. Even when others dismiss them, it reminded me that strength doesn't always come from loud defiance sometimes. It comes from quiet persistence, from refusing to let go of the truth, even when it feels unbearable. Most of all, I learned that resilience is often found in the places we least expect. I thought I was too old, too tired, too worn down to fight a battle like this. But what I discovered was that I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. And if you've ever found yourself doubting your own strength, I want you to remember this: you are capable of more than you realize. The people who underestimate you have no idea just how much courage you carry inside. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And tell me in the comments, have you ever faced a situation where trusting your instincts changed everything? I'd love to hear your experience.